So James, liquidity stress testing. It's a term we typically associate with banks, but today it's something corporates are looking at more and more. How can Treasury professionals identify, analyse, manage their risk to ensure liquidity contingency planning?
So again, Danny, I think liquidity stress testing is another example of banking regulation which can be applied as a best practice to any corporate treasurer's risk and control framework. And basically the concept of liquidity stress testing says that you apply stress scenarios to your balance sheet and look at what the result would be. So that could be simple measures such as an increase in the unemployment rate or change to interest rates, all the way through to simulating historical events such as 9/11 to see what that impact that would have on your current balance sheet. Again, it's just good practice that organisations, even where it's not regulatory mandated, should be looking at some of these as best practice for their risk and control framework. I believe that the concept of liquidity stress testing should be something that a corporate should be able to really just click a button on a piece of software and simulate some of these tests on a day-to-day basis, because of course the balance sheet fluctuates on a day-to-day basis. So we should move away from it being a weekly or a monthly exercise to more of a continuous exercise, and we're providing the types of solutions and the types of data sets in our software that will allow a corporate treasurer to do that and have a much greater visibility, not just of the balance sheet and his current liquidity positions, but also what those positions would look like under certain events. But we've covered quite a lot of different regulations today, and I think one of the other things that we have to be aware of as we cover all these different types of regulation and risk management practices is that not only is there a lot of them, but there's a lot of scope for national interpretations of how it gets implemented. And potentially what that can lead to is even more complexity in the regulatory landscape, because what you end up with is regulatory arbitrage, where organisations are basically playing off national or geographic interpretations of the regulation against each other. And so just further complicating some of the way that these regulations are interpreted, and corporate treasurers have to then manage from a balance sheet perspective in terms of what's going to derive the best value for the organisation.
CRD4, which we discussed earlier on, is an interpretation of an element of Basel III. So you have this split of regulations being interpreted by different regulators. So you might have different reporting requirements within different regions. So what does that mean from a treasurer standpoint is that they have multiple reportings to be done across multiple areas. Again, this issue of trend is going to be very important. And to James's point on the stress testing element is very applicable to treasurers today. So the seasonality of treasury operations means that most large treasuries have an in-house bank. So these in-house banks act as banks within the organization. From their perspective, applying these types of stress test scenarios to seasonality, so you might have a Christmas shopping, Black Friday, any of those type of events, they can calculate how to best utilize the liquidity that comes out of those events through historical trend analysis, and that's where these fintech tools really come into their own. Products like BankSense really allow a trend analysis to be done without going into spreadsheets, because you can click a tab, put your dates in, and then it shows you the historic trend within a certain period as well.
Particularly in a depressed rate environment like we are at the moment, then we've taken the view at BankSense that real-time information is only the start of it, and actually, as David alluded to, what you need to get to is forecasting and automated generation of predictive data, because only then can you start to make best use of your liquidity, because there will be scenarios where liquidity dries up late in the day, and so if you're spending all your time gathering information, then you have very little time to invest it. You're going to be faced with more punitive rates, and so we're using technology at BankSense to give customers, corporate treasurers, the opportunity to invest based on forecasted information, based on predictive analytics that we generate before the information has actually even, or before the event has actually even happened.